What's up, y'all? Welcome back. Welcome back. Today, I'm here to talk about the most secret memory of men and bound to violence. Let's get it. Favorite reader, that's who you are. Traveling near, traveling far. Through every chapter, you're the star. Favorite reader, that's who you are. What happens when a writer disappears after being accused of plagiarism? Can literature ever truly be original? Who gets forgiven for literary borrowing and who gets destroyed? And what does the literary world really award? Is it genius, marketability, scandal, or myth? So first, let me say, out of these two books I'm discussing today, I first read The Most Secret Memory of Man. This is part literary mystery, philosophical investigation, almost like a meditation on writing itself, especially African writing. And it's an ode to literature. And this story is inspired by the author that wrote Bound to Violence. Okay, we just gonna get right into it. Okay, so Yambo published this book in 1968, and when he first did, it turned heads. Okay, it got the attention of a lot of literary critics. He was the first African author to win this prestigious award, and this sparked a lot of controversy before we even get to the scandal because of the contents of this book. After it received all the accolades and everything, it was then accused. The book itself, and the author was accused of plagiarism. And after he was accused of plagiarism, Yambo disappeared. He went back to his hometown. I don't think people knew that at first, but he disappeared off the scene. Nobody could find him. He became essentially a ghost. And that's what this book is based on. Okay, so the main character of this book, Elamane, is supposed to be Yambo. In this book, Elamane is, he's like a revolutionary writer. And his work immediately it captures its audience. It sucks them in. They obsess about it. It's different. It's gritty. It's out there. It has a cult-like following. And it's so good. But it wasn't received. But the whole point in this book, I think, is like the thoughts of how it was received by literary critics, reviewers, and even its readers. And I could kind of see how that played on this. So I said when I read this book that this was probably the best book that I've read all year. And so I knew I wanted to read this because I knew it was inspired. And I've been asking myself, do I wish I would have read Bound to Violence first? And I don't think so. I actually like the order that I read them in. Even though if I could go back in the past and I knew nothing about them, I probably would have read them in order. But when I first got The Most Secret Memory of Men, I didn't know it was based on Bound to Violence or Yambo at all. Like I said, this book talks a lot about how the writing itself is perceived, and that could be based on like what the author intended. It could be misconstrued, a lot of things, which leads me to Bound to Violence. The controversial scandal surrounding the plagiarism became bigger than this book itself. And at the time, it was big. Like I said, it was highly regarded. Yambo took an approach at the time that was very controversial. People did not like some people. Some people did not like how he portrayed Africa in general. There was, and it's talked about a little bit in Most Secret Memory of Men too, but there was this like expectation for African writers to like write this polished version of Africa in perfect French and classy, prestigious French. And it was just supposed to tackle these like heavy hitting, higher than life themes. It's supposed to talk about, the stuff that you would like. There was something laid out that they expected African writers to write when they were talking about Africa. Yambo took a whole different approach. He highlighted how gross society can be. He highlighted how people can be greedy and barbaric and how they could topple on themselves and how a society can eat itself. Talked about a lot of stuff that people didn't appreciate at the time for the most part. But then when the scandal came out, that plagiarism scandal and accusation was even bigger than the book itself, even though it was already big. And the crazy thing is, which I think I got it in here. The crazy thing is, one of the main people that he was accused of stealing work from, like plagiarizing, literally said he was flattered to see that his apple tree had found fertile soil in his hands, and added that he was indebted to him and not the other way around. So I thought that was interesting because the main person that he was said that was stolen from, like a couple of other people actually did sue him, but the main person said that he was actually honored and he felt indebted to him and was glad that he can inspire his work, which got me thinking about a lot of things. And I did think about it when I first read The Most Secret Memory of Man, but it really came up in this when I was thinking about it, because what is originality? What is the difference between being inspired and plagiarizing? And I feel like on the surface, we can say, look, if you take somebody's work literally, like their literal ideas, what they came up with, their intellectual property, and you push it out as your own without giving credit, without getting permission, like we know the cut and dry of what plagiarism is. But when you really think about somebody being heavily influenced and inspired by another author or another story, where does that, what percentage are we talking about that's acceptable and that's not? And if it is like an objective number, why are some people held to that standard and other groups aren't? It does seem that there has been this like double standard in literary spaces, and not just then when this book was published, but in general. I think we could still see remnants of that now. And I don't even know if I want to say remnants, because I feel like a double standard is still present even to this day in the literary community, in the writing spaces. So was he just borrowing? Did he go too far and try not to perform this expected African literature that people expected him to write? What was he doing? And something also should be said for the, like, you can't take somebody's work, like multiple people's things, and smash it together to make one cohesive story and it be like this super big masterpiece. Like, I do think there takes a certain amount of skill to be able to piece a lot of different things together, including weaving in your own ideas to create this cohesive story. But again, what percentage are we talking about? Okay, now let me go ahead and just talk about what this book is about, because I do want to kind of give my review and overview of this book. This book, Bound to Violence, is true to its name. This book was violent in like some grotesque ways that I don't think I was expecting. And it's not to the point that I'm like, I can't keep reading this, but it was like graphic scenes that I just had to be like, dang, like, the visual I just got from that is a whole lot. It's check your trigger warnings. But it chronicles the centuries of corruption and violence within this fictional empire called the Saif Empire. Like I said before, it definitely challenges this romanticized version of Africa that we had seen in previous years, written from African authors. It was a critique on colonialism, religion, slavery, power, greed, all of that, which there's bits of that in here too. But yeah, that's what this book really is about at its core. And it, like I said, it shook the table when it first came out, because this wasn't a romanticized version of Africa. He really did challenge the thoughts, like he challenged the status quo of what he was supposed to be writing about at that time, supposed to be. Instead of this like attempt to reclaim dignity after like the post-colonial time that we typically saw, Yambo chose violence and brutality and the exploitation that took place before colonialism. It's not like to glorify colonialism at all. It's a critique of it, but it does show a different angle than what people expected him to write about at this time. And this title, Bound to Violence, the author used the violence as a way to show that it was foundational to civilization and not an interruption to it, which raises the question, are empires inherently violent? There was a part in here too. I wish I like, let me see if I actually had it. Yeah, there was a part where they were talking about a group of people. He was talking about a group of people, and he said they were ordained by hatred and had an innate evil, bloodlust, and thirst for revenge. And does power inevitably produce domination? Another thing that I thought about while reading this. It was I said, wow, all of these chapters had visceral violence, but this chapter was downright brutal. Which had, oh my goodness, yeah. And that's intentional. I do believe that he wrote this to be intentionally abrasive. It had very grotesque imagery. It had very descriptive scenes of stuff that was just hard to read. I'm not even gonna lie. Somewhat of a detached narration, again, very intentionally done. Somewhat of a moral ambiguity, and it definitely like there was a refusal to have a hero in this story. Again, going against the grain. He was going against the grain. And it's another thing. I think I wrote a note on this. I don't know. My notes all over the place, so I'm just going to try to remember what I wrote. But I do, speaking of going against the grain, there was, when they were describing like Yambo as an author, there was like this importance and this emphasis on creating your name for yourself, like building your own reputation, having a reputation that precedes you and that's greater than your father. And it also alluded that well-behaved writers or authors didn't make history. And that's the embodiment. Like, that's what this is. He did not play like color into the lines. He did not color within the lines and play nice. He definitely took a gamble and a risk, and it paid off initially before, the plagiarism scandal. It did pay off, and it's interesting too. He was true to like what his vision was of the book and was willing to take the criticism that came with it because he knew the type of story that he wanted to put out. So that's important. And that can also be related to the day that we're in now with content creation, being inspired by others and putting out the content that you want to put out, regardless of how it might be received, because you're just being true to you. And yeah, like taking something that's already been done 20 times and making it your own. Yeah, I don't know. I do believe this was like a very important read. It was historically rich. The imagery was so vivid, and it raised so many philosophical questions. That's another thing I liked about this. Same with this, and I'll link somewhere where I did where I talked about this book. It was in another video, but yeah, I will say this was like it had a plot, but it definitely was character driven, more so than Bound to Violence. So yeah, but what I will say, I told you I'll link the video, but let me just give a quick overview here of this. This is about a Senegalese author who is based on Yambo in real life, who writes a fantastic book. And it's just like the literary community, the real true like lovers of literature flocked to this. It was so hard to come by, and once you did read it, it was literally life-changing. Like, this book was changing their lives, and they became obsessed with it and engulfed with it because it was such a gem. But he was also accused of plagiarism in this book. And so you get to see him disappear. And the main character of this book is on a hunt to find out what happened to him. Does he have another book that he wrote? Is this his like creme de la creme? Like, where is this man? And I need to know. I need to find out because I feel this super strong draw to him. There was conversation in here about literature as a whole and what it represents. It was a conversation in here about the role of other people in the literary spaces, like the critics, the reviewers, journalists, and also about if the work is being received how the author intended. I know we talk a lot about I know people talk a lot about how good literature is a conversation between a reader and a writer. But I do believe that when a writer sits down, they do have something that they're trying to accomplish and get across. And this book really highlights if that actually gets across and how it feels when it doesn't get across and people totally miss what the author was trying to do. And when people don't, and when people totally get it and what that connection looks like. So, yeah. Yeah. A quote in this book says like good literature, a good book is about nothing because it's about too much, so it's about nothing. And I thought that was interesting because it really is when you think about a book that's like one of the best books you've ever read and you're trying to explain that to somebody, it almost feels like you're doing a book a disservice or you're not doing it justice just by describing a plot or just by describing like the main character. It feels like it's about so much that I don't even want to tell you anything about it because I feel you just got to read it. You have to go on that journey and experience it because nothing I say will really capture what this book is about. And at the same time, if something is about everything, then is it about nothing? I don't know, but oh, so good. And it was one part in this book I mentioned in my first video. This book was so good. And there was one introduction to something in here. It was one part of this book I just was not feeling. And I was like, that's the one drawback. And then I read Down to Violence. And I totally understand why that one piece was in this book because it was going back to reference this book and this author. And so it made perfect sense why that element was in this book because this book was drawn from this book. So the little piece I didn't like, I totally understand the connection and why I was in this book. And that also, like, seeing what he got from Bound to Violence and how he made these connections and built this world and this, like, this mystery that we were solving alongside him. Also, while, like, reflecting on literature and thinking about how that is relevant in our day and age, again, in this space of content creation and even just like in today's society, where I don't know, it's just very, very interesting. Both of these books highlight, and sorry if I have to keep cutting this video because my kids, they doing a whole lot right now. But anyways, both of these books highlight and talk about the obsession that people have with greatness. In a few different ways. The writers themselves trying to achieve it, the readers and critics and judges trying to assess it and seek it out. And then can you duplicate that? Once you pour out everything that you have to a work, can anything else, like, to you, maybe to other people, because you can name authors and you like every single one of their books hit, but to the one that's writing it, is there this singular body of work that's like so representative of you and it's your life's work that nothing else in your head can compare to it? And do you feel like that the people that truly, truly understand what you're doing, do they agree with you? And what that looks like and does psychologically to you, and just what, like, the headspace it will put you in. That was disgusting here and in here. Very, very interesting. Both the Yambo in real life and the main character in The Most Secret Memory of Men, which is based on him, focus on how writers can almost get to a point of isolation because they're so, like, they in work mode and they want to really pour out onto the page and get what they mean out so it can convey and it can start that conversation, like I said, between them and the people that are receiving it. These was just so good. I just like when I say I want to read a good book, this is what I'm talking about. These books together, like, I was like, dang, it's just one part in here I don't like. Read this, boom, it makes sense. I understood why he did that. And it just added a layer to why I like this so much. And then I read this afterwards, like I said, And it was just like no other book I've read personally. At first I was like, what is going on? Who is the main character? When I first was reading this book, I was really trying to figure out, who are we following? Like, what's going on here? And I'm like, okay, so this is the Empire. Okay, time is passing. It's this group of people, this group of people. We got this person here. And none of them seem to be the main character. And then I got towards the end of the book, and there was this guy. And I'm like, oh, he's the main character. I think. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's who I would call the main character. Yeah, Kasumi. I would call him the main character, but you get to see him, how he thinks about his siblings, his mama, his daddy. You also see the same thing represented in here. And this also, ironically, is a good example of what I meant by being inspired by something and creating something totally new on your own. This book, being inspired by this book, and this was a masterpiece to me, based on a masterpiece to me. And it's just when you see people like pay homage, and then I'm like, I don't know, like you see them pay homage, and you see like bits and pieces of this in here, and how it all tied together, and how are some things in here that he expound upon in here, and how some stuff discussed here that he just took it to another level here because he really dug in. How are some things here that he almost shied away from in here. And it's based on like the type of writers they are, personal preference, the time they was born, the places they was born. They're both African writers. He is from Senegal, he is from Mali. And it's just, this is good. This is good. And I finished it, but I've been like sitting on these two for a minute because I didn't really know how I wanted to talk about both of them. Like, I didn't just want to give a review because I feel like it's just so much more to say about these. Another thing, earlier I mentioned that these books kind of highlight how there's an obsession with greatness. This also kind of challenges that and questions at the same time that it's like praising masterpieces. It also challenges, are masterpieces real? Like, is literary prestige made up? Why certain books survive and others disappear? Like, oh, so good, so good. Like I said, both of these books tackle very, very similar things. Some things are more heavily explored in one book over the other, but still they're both there. They both have themes of literature and theft, like I just said, influence versus paying homage. Is literature derivative? Are certain writers based on based on their location or their group or whatever are they granted more freedom to improvise and to borrow and to interpret other literature than other groups? And why is that? And is originality a myth? Like, how original can you really be? You know, they say it's nothing new under the sun, but you can always bring yourself to something, and that does change it. How much? I don't know, but it does change it. And that constantly had me thinking about some of my favorite things to read, what they may have been based on. And I always love, like, when I'm reading stuff and I can see influences of people before them, that gets me excited. I'm like, dang, I can tell this was heavily influenced by XYZ. And I enjoy that. Like, I appreciate it because I'm like, they're a lover of literature too. Like, they read this is who inspired them and influenced them. And I don't know. I enjoy it, but I guess I never thought about if the people being borrowed from actually enjoy it. Yeah, I don't know. Again, every time I say this about literature, I'm thinking about like the internet and content creation, because like stuff has shifted over the years where you did have to pretty much be original in some kind of way. And now you really can just take like the same exact thing that somebody else is doing and you just do it your own way. And that's seen as original because you're doing it your own way, because you're being authentic, but you don't necessarily have to come up with the idea. So we have kind of seen that shift in online spaces too. And I'm wondering what the shifts look like over time in literature. it's easy to see it in social media because I just feel like it's at a more visible level and layer. But I wonder how that shifts in literature over time, over the decades, you know? Both books talk about power and domination and violence in a way. They both talk about colonialism and what it looks like for two different people to take two different paths, and if they're following the headship of their father in that way and what that means. The role of the village in their lives, what's expected of them, and what happens when one person takes a colonial path and the other person wants to stay true to how they were raised and take their cultural path. So what that diversion looks like. Exploitation, the like going back to the culture and colonial thing, cultural erasure. Yeah, just this duo right here, this did it for me. Both books explore that search for authenticity. Like, can identity-based art ever truly escape the audience's expectations? Can it? And are marginalized authors pressured to fit these molds that's more like readily accessible and readily accepted? And even further than that, like, is authenticity a marketing category? Like, that kind of came up to me a few times when reading The Most Secret Memory of Men. Okay, now, these books have some similarities and some differences. I kind of touched on them a little bit, but now I'm going to get a little bit more into it. Some similarities between these two. They both have like a fragmented narrative structure. The way that the story is told, it's not exactly the same, but it's similar in the way that it's told. Like I said, it's a little fragmented. They both have layered storytelling, which I appreciated and I actually really like. They both have really dense literary references. I appreciated that and I liked it. They both have a huge historical scope. I appreciated that and I liked it. If you can't tell, I like these two books. And they both kind of have like metafictional elements somewhat. It's not like, I wouldn't classify them as metafiction, but they both have slightly, like, they got metafictional elements, which I think were placed well throughout. I really did enjoy it. There's some philosophical similarities. They both explore the difference between individuality and communism. They both show like a skepticism towards institutions. They both like challenge the authority of literary legitimacy. And then they both really explore a lot. I see it a lot in here, and I did see it in here, but that difference between like memory and legacy. They both explore what's left after the writer is gone. What is left for the world to enjoy? And is that enough? And who's deciding if it's enough or not? So, yeah. Both of these books have like this underlying tension in them, a little bit of ambiguity, a tad bit of instability, and a main character that is really struggling with this internal tension, this idea of a writer finding his way back home. Now, for some differences, Bound to Violence is 100% more harsh and violent. The name is not there for fun. That's what this book is. It's brutal. In the actual plot that's taking place. This does have some brutality, but this is way more like brash. I don't know if it was the time that it was written, which also makes me think about the time period that books are written in, because if he wrote this book in the same year that he wrote this, I wonder, would it still be like this? Like, would the edges be a little more rounded, or would it just be like, nah, it's blunt, you gonna get it how I give it, period. I don't care if this was published in the 60s or the 2020s. Okay, it is what it is, because this is harsh, and it's shorter. Obviously, it's a shorter book, but man, it's good. Like, and I typically don't like gory stuff like that. Like, some of these scenes, I was like, there's a whole lot. I'm thinking about the women in here. In both books, I pretty much thought about how women were portrayed, but in here, I was like, dang, like, how the children, like the different villages, so much. Both books make you think about politics in a way. But this book was, I think, more emotionally, like while this book will make you feel emotional, I feel like you can be more emotionally tied to this book, in my opinion. This book will, it will make you emotional, but not necessarily for individual characters. Where this one you do have like certain characters you can latch on to. Yeah, heavy things on literature and the hypocrisy of a lot of things. Violence, the hypocrisy of how violence is seen in the past, in the future, and in the present, and then it still relates it to literature, which I think it was just like, dang, this book shows how literature can be like transcendent. In a way, it kind of teetered on a line of maybe it can be dangerous depending on who's asking. Like literature might be dangerous depending, but it also can transcend time and spaces and groups and touch people in different ways. And maybe people are impacted differently by it, but you know you touched. You know, like it's got you like when you read it. So yeah, great books. Yeah, so I just want to say I'm gonna end this because I could talk about these all day. Here's the thing: read these two, and if you only read one, I don't know which one to tell you to read. Read the one that you think sounds most interesting. I connected with these books for different reasons. Be prepared if you read this one to, if you anything like me, to be like clutching your pearls at times. But this one might be a little more accessible depending on the type of read. I feel like most people might find this a little more accessible. But here's the thing. Overall, when we're talking about literature, when we're talking about content creation, when we're talking about being influenced and originality and putting out work, it really made me think, like, one, as a reviewer, like I say I'm a reviewer, but you know, like a YouTube reviewer, somebody that comes on here and gives my take on books and what I got from it and the themes and what I think that the author was trying to portray. I always wonder if that is actually what the author is trying to portray. Like that's what I get from it. But like, am I missing it? And then with these two books that were both translated, like was thing like I think, yeah, they were both written in French. And I think what may have gotten lost in translation, like how much is lost, how much of that nuance can be lost because I'm reading it in English when it was intended to be read in French and that's how they wrote it. How much of that, like the feeling, because you know sometimes just the way that sentences are crafted adds to the story and emotion and sets the scene, and it's a lot that goes into that. How much is being lost during translation? I wonder that too. And then I wonder, can curation ever be original? Can it ever be like, if I'm taking multiple things and I'm putting it together to create this new thing? Because he didn't just, in Bound to Violence, he didn't just borrow from like European writers. He did, but he also borrowed from the Quran and he also borrowed from the Bible and he also borrowed from like other things. And he also brought a lot of himself to the story and thought about his own life and his own village. And how much are you like how much of that is allowed? And it seems like there's no objective answer to that. And who gets to provide this subjective thing, like this subjective verdict, you know? And an overarching theme I'm gonna end this video with. Overall, both of these books made me think about history. Who gets remembered and who disappears and why? Who decides that? You know? Yeah. Maybe both novels, in a way, argue that literature is almost inseparable from power. In a way, maybe the obsession with originality obscures storytelling. maybe scandals and accusations reveal more about institutions than they do the art and the artist. Maybe. Now, y'all, there are exceptions to this. There's times where you 100% stole this. Like, you literally stole this, what you want to do. But when it gets to in that gray area and there's a little more nuance, maybe. And then what if the fear of plagiarism is really fear that no story truly belongs just to you? Like, yeah, maybe all these stories interconnected. Yeah, maybe all of the stories are interconnected. That's it, y'all. I'm gonna leave on that. Read both of these. Let me know if you've read either of these. This was this has been a highlight of my reading year in 2026 because I'm telling you, this made me think about so much, especially in this digital space. So that's it, y'all. I'm gonna see you on the next one.
Pages turning soft as silk, stories flowing like warm milk. A journey starts with every line, worlds unfolding in your mind. Bookmarks falling where dreams collide. Every cover's got a tale inside. Favorite reader, that's who you are. Traveling near, traveling far. Through every chapter